スラモーターズの社長、スペース X ロケット会社の社長、イーロン・マスク。
なんかフリーエネルギーの発明をしたと。
正確に言うとリチウムバッテリーのエンジニアを公開しますけど、リチウムバッテリーって電気を充電すると、例えば生蓄電池昔からあるんです。あいつは過充電が起きないんですよ。でもリチウム電池って過充電が起きて爆発したんですよ。だからマネジメントシステムがすごい大事で、過充電しないような絶対安全装置みたいなそういうものが必要なんです。で例えばボーイング787に乗っけてた GS エアサの蓄電池が一回爆破して事件になったりとか、ソニーのノートパソコンを作ったリチウムバッテリーが爆発したりとか、ね、サムスンのスマホが爆発したりっていうのをしてたじゃないですか。あれすごい難しいんですよ。あそこはバッテリーマネジメントシステムのプロジェクト会社なんです。だからほらパナソニックと一緒にメガハッピー作ったじゃないですか。あそこはだからテスラとパナソニックの間に厳重なファイアウォールが入ってて、パナソニックはリチウムバッテリーのパワーユニットだけ作ってるんですよ。リチウムバッテリーのユニットだけを作っていて、マネジメントシステムはテスラ側が作ってるんです。でこれはもう完全にシークレットなんです。だから彼らがこうやってそこなんですね。だからあの人たちはバッテリーを入れるんです。というかだからテスラっていう名前がそうですよね。
そうですね、まさに。
もう映画見ました？エジソンすげえ。ニコラ・テスラが出てます。
エジソンに
そう。みたいな話が出てくるんですけど、すごくイーロン・マスクは過去の偉人をものすごくインスパイアしていて、例えばスペース X のロケットエンジンの名前ってイギリスの戦闘機の例えばファルコン9に使われてるマーニーの飛行機で、その前のケツトレルっていうエンジンもイギリスの戦闘機なんですけど、トヨタとか、トヨタ実はうちのロケットの会社に人材を供給していただいていて、2人運転されてるんですけど、僕トヨタは変わらざるを得ないと思っていて、まさにパソコンが出てきた時の IBM にすごく状況がものすごく似ていて、もう世界の巨人だったんですけど、その巨人の産業そのものが、要はオフコンの市場が終わったのと同じように、ガソリン自動車の時代が終わるんですよ。だからそこに対応しなきゃいけなくて、でもガソリンエンジンがこうやっていくなんで、トヨタも日産もそうですけど、既存の自動車メーカーっていうのはガソリンエンジンを作るのが大変なので、彼らは競争力維持していったので、それが大変じゃなくなるわけですよね。そうするとその優位性が一気になくなるわけですよ。だからすごい危機なんですよ。で僕は個人的に言うと、トヨタは
業態変換しようとしてやってますよね。
業態変換はどうなるかっていうと、その主力事業の業態変換は今富士の元に作ってるスマートシティ、つまりモビリティを核にした街づくりのコンサルティングソリューション提供っていう、だから IBM が企業向けのソリューションサービスに業態転換したのと同じように、僕はスマートシティを作る事業というのがトヨタの業態転換がすごく向いてるんじゃないかなと個人的に思っていて、むしろその自動車の製造はもうバイアウトしちゃう、中国の会社とかにバイアウトしちゃうぐらいでもいいのかなっていうぐらい思ってる、正直。
IBM がそうだったわけですよね。
実際にトヨタの社長さんはそれぐらいのイメージ持ってる可能性ありますよね。
それは
その周りは分からないですよね。
周りは分からないですよね。でそのガソリンエンジンのコアテクの部分をさらにその昇華させていくとロケットなんですね。ロケットに投資することもすごくメイクセンスすると思います。
楠さんにちょっとぜひお聞きしたいんですけれども、ネット証券の口座の開設が今急増しているという背景あるかと思います。投資への関心が高まっているということの表れだと思うんですが、こちらどういうふうに見ていらっしゃるでしょうか。
本来は投資文化というのは高まらなければならないというというところで、現金比率が高すぎるし、でさらに本当に資金を効率的に動かすためにはやっぱりその株式であったりリスク一切振り向かなきゃいけないというのはもう理屈上明らかだったんだけれども、でもそれは教育でそういう機会もないし、政治家が言ってるわけでもないから、なかなか理屈ではそうなんだけれども、きっかけがつかめなかったというところが一つのイベントがこのコロナウイルスなんです。このコロナウイルスが本質的な本当にどれだけ意味があるのか、ただたまたまの事象なんですよね。でもたまたまな事象が世の中に与える影響が結構大きくて、それによってじゃあ僕らどういう行動しなきゃいけない、未来に不安がこのキャッシュどうしようって言った時に、論理的決として、だったらじゃあやっぱりリスク資産で何か自分たち払わないとこのまま厳しいよと、このまま会社で調べていっても、どうなるか分からないし、やっぱりそこは 資産を取り除ける必要が必要だというふうに、多くの、特に若い人を中心に考えています。そうすると、じゃあそれをどこで買うんですかっていった場合に、じゃあその銀行の窓口ですと、証券会社の窓口になってことではなくて、世界で一番合理的に考えると、一番便利、一番手数料があって、一番情報量が多いのが、証券ですよ、ということなので、だから今回そこに行くべきはずの、僕は一つのイベントによって加速したっていうのは、今回のことかなと思っています。
ちなみに土井さんは投資に興味が
今まで全くその考える機会がなかったんですけど、まさにおっしゃるようにそのコロナで、友人でも始める人とかいて、じゃあどうやってお金って運用してるのかなって考えるようになったので、なんか本当に勉強し始めたという感じです。
結構なんでしょう、すごく不安だったのが、コロナが始まる前って結構企業ブームがやっと日本に持ってきやすいって言って、例えば東大の子なんかでも理系の子でもそう理系の子でもそうだけど、すごく起業する子をする子増えたじゃないですか、去年ぐらいというか今年ぐらいから。でそれで、たくさん相談来るようになったんですよ。やっぱり官公庁の役人になろうとか、それから大企業に就職すれば安心安全だと思ったそのこと思ってたんだけど、聞く限りそうじゃないんですよ。なんか逆にみんな情報早いから、このコロナに何が起きたかっていうところで、例えば大企業の人たちが、結果的にIT の準備全くできなくて、多くの会社が何もできなくて下期待してるみたいなものっていうのは、先輩たちにネットワークがあるから、もうそれもう学生がみんな知ってるんですよ。そうすると結局コロナであってマザーズの株がナスダックの株のその前にも大きくなってるので、結局一番担当したそういう会社がいるので、やっぱりこういう会社だったら面白いとか、やっぱりリスクは自分でその大企業に行くよりは取った方がいいかと思ってるので、結構東大の子とかの企業のイメージっていうのがなんか衰えた方に私しないので、それはすごいいいことだなと思うんですよね。
逆にでも、もう正直みんながやってることが遅すぎて呆れるんですよね。なんで今更そんなことを始めるんだろうっていうことを、結構だから最近例えば RPA とか言ったりしてるじゃないですか、業務の効率化みたいな。何それ一応もうなんかすごくすごいな
昨年あたり
そうでも堀江さんの興奮が終わったぐらいに僕産業が始まると思ってたんですよ。やっぱり堀江さんがこれ面白いって言ってる時って僕もやっぱり意味分かんなかったですけど、なんか語り始めたから2年後ぐらいからリアルな流れが始まって、その3年後ぐらいから人がわーっていう時に堀江さんはもう次のチャレンジしてるとか、この5年前に何言ってんだろうっていう感じになってるんじゃないかなってすごく思うんですよ。
なんかね、もう飽きちゃいます。
今興味持ってることは何ですか？
今興味持ってることは何ですかって困るんですけど、なんだろう、オンラインサロン5年前からやってるんですけど、オンラインサロンでやってることですよね。オンラインサロンの意味って説明してもみんな分かんないんですけど、多分サロンにいる人もよく分かってないと思うんですけど、10年、何年後か分かんないけど、何年後かにこういうことだったんだなってみんな思うんじゃないかな。多分僕ホワイトカラーの9割はいらないと思っていて、すでに今でも僕いつもこの撮影とかを見てて思うんですけど、人数多すぎだよねでこれ笑ってんだけど、これをすごく容認してることがすごいなって、僕は関係ないからいいんですけど、それは別にニュースピックスの話なんで、
テレビより少ないですけどまだ多いですよね。
全然多すぎ。いやいいんですよ。だから必要ない人が多すぎるんですよ。何かイベントが起きた時に一斉に必要なくなるんですよ。ズームだと本当に人必要ないから。であれ見ててテレビにね、サンデージャポンという番組にズームじゃないけどネット中継で出たんですよ。最初に出な行けなくなりました。これでズームでやったら新幹線の中でやったんですけど、コントなんですよ。あとその前にラジオで落合陽一君と僕の対談みたいな話でズームで対談したんですよ。でこれ面白いからレモンチャンネルで愛してくれって言ったんです YouTube で。そっちの方がYouTube のスーパーチャットって機能があって投げ銭がもらえるんですけど、それも稼げるし広告も稼げるから、絶対こっちやりたいですって言ったらラジオの放送権の問題で無理ですって言われて、はって思ってめっちゃはって思って音がある人に頼まれたんで出たんだけど、ズームで対談して YouTube にそのまま流すのがいいのに、なんかラジオだけしか流さない。でもそのラジオラジコで聞ける。
そうか、ラジコの権利なんですね、それね。
いやラジコの権利なのか何なのか知らないんですけど、
でもおっしゃることがあります。
何をやりたいのかさっぱりわからないっていうか、
結局そういうのがあぶり出せる。
そう
だから
そうしたことですよね。
だって放送電波をそのために占有する意味ないでしょっていう。 インターネットの素晴らしさっていうのは何なのかっていうと、マルチレイヤー構造で、その物理レイヤーが何でもいいんですよ。光ファイバーでも Wi-Fi でもモバイル通信でも何でもいいんですよ。でもそれに垂直統合で一つの電波帯域で、それはもう国民の財産ですよ。あれを占有させてこんなくだらないことに使ってるっていうのはもう本当に腹立たしい、だってインターネットによっては待機潜入も必要ないし、で音声データなので大したデータ量じゃないんで、全然たくさん来てるというかいろんな人たち見せられるんだけど、こいつら理解してるのかなと思って。だから今だに言うと、その放送と通信の融合みたいなことを僕は20年ぐらい前に昔から言ってたじゃないですか。あの頃から誰も結局は分かってねえんだな、そのインターネットのマルチレイヤー構造を話したの藤野さんもしたと思うんですけど、インターネットの素晴らしさはここなんですよって話を多分したと思うんですけど、それがいまだに今
分かってない部分と、あと総務省を含めたその利権もあるんですよ。
いや利権はあるんだけど、利権なんてものはこの素晴らしさをみんなが理解したら、なんでテレビのためにこんな貴重な黄金周波数をその占有させてんだと。しかも全然払ってないよ。電波使用量めちゃくちゃもうデジタルなんですよね。あれだから端末の数に応じて、端末というか通信局の数に応じての課金だったと思うんで、だから少ないんですよね。要は携帯電話キャリアが払ってる電波使用量とテレビ局が払ってる電波使用量、100分の1、100倍ぐらい差があると思う。それはもうすごいことですよ、とんでもないことです。それをあれですよ、検察官と麻雀をしながら見てるわけですよ。賭け麻雀をしながら見てるわけですよ。いやでもそういうことなんだと思うんですよ。
I think it's also important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. So the normal way that we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. We're doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it's like what other people are doing.
Me too type ideas.
Yeah,
Slight
iterations
yeah.
on a theme, it's kind of mentally easier to reason by analogy rather than from first principles. But first principles is kind of a physics way of looking at the world, and what that really means is you kind of boil things down to the most fundamental truths and say, okay, what are we sure is true, or as sure as possible is true, and then reason up from there. That takes a lot more mental energy.
Give me an example of that. Like, what's one thing that you've done that on and you feel has worked for you?
Sure. So somebody could say, and in fact people do, that battery packs are really expensive, and that's just the way they'll always be, because that's the way they've been in the past. You're like, well, no, that's pretty dumb, because if you applied that reasoning to anything new, then you wouldn't be able to ever get to that new thing.
Right.
It's like you can't say, horses. Nobody wants a car because horses are great and we're used to them and they can eat grass. And there's lots of grass all over the place, and there's not like there's no gasoline that people can buy, so people are never going to get cars.
Right.
But people did say that. And for batteries, they would say, it's going to cost. Historically, it's cost $600 per kilowatt hour, and so it's not going to be much better than that in the future. And you say, no, okay, well, what are those batteries made of? So first principles we say, okay, what are the material constituents of the batteries? What is the spot market value of the material constituents? So you can say, okay, it's got cobalt, nickel, aluminum, carbon, and some polymers for separation, and a sealed can. So break that down on a material basis and say, okay, if we bought that in the London Metal Exchange, what would each of those things cost? Like, it's like $80 per kilowatt hour. So clearly, you just need to think of clever ways to take those materials and combine them into the shape of a battery cell, and you can have batteries that are much cheaper than anyone realizes.
One thing I really like about you is you are unusually fearless and willing to go in the face of other people to do something that's crazy. I know a lot of pretty crazy people, you still stand out. Where does that come from, or how do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But yeah, there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of fear.
So speaking of important things,
Like people shouldn't think, people shouldn't think, well, I feel fear about this and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. Like there have to be something mentally wrong if you shouldn't feel fear.
so you just feel it and let the importance of it drive you to do that.
Yeah, actually something that can be helpful is fatalism to some degree. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. Starting SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were less than 10%. And I just accepted that actually probably I would just lose everything. But that maybe would make some progress. If we could just move the ball forward, even if we died, maybe some other company could pick up the baton and keep moving forward. So it would still do some good. Yeah, same with Tesla. I thought the odds of the car company succeeding were extremely low. So what advice do I have for college graduates? Certainly, I'd invite you to apply for a job at Solar City or Tesla or SpaceX. If not, then if that doesn't work for whatever reason, then apply to jobs at other companies in that arena or try starting a company. If you study engineering and figure out how to design new things, then it's relatively easy to start a company. You just need to get a few like-minded people with you. Well, I'd say that the space business is quite hard to start a company in the space business because it's such a capital-intensive business. So it may be better to do something in solar power, or if you're going to do it in cars, do it as kind of a component supplier for cars.
Musk has college degrees in business and physics, but SpaceX is his first venture in aerospace. How did you get the expertise to be the chief technology officer of a rocket ship company?
Well, I do have a physics background. That's helpful as a foundation. And then I read a lot of books and talked to a lot of smart people. Don't just follow the trend. You may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach for first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if there's something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method.
And I want to know, what is the one thing that has surprised you about your life?
Well, I'm surprised by the whole thing, honestly. I certainly didn't expect to be for any of these things to happen, honestly. Yeah, I just knew I wanted to be involved in technology, and in fact, the only reason I started a company back in '95, an internet company, was because I couldn't get it. There were only a few internet companies, and I couldn't get a job at any of them. So I tried to get a job at Netscape, and sent my resume in and tried hanging out in the lobby, but I just tried to talk to anyone, and then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll have to start a company.
Thank you.
I wouldn't say I'm fearless. In fact, I think I feel fear quite strongly. But if what we're doing isn't what one thing is I think is important enough, then I just override the fear. So, but it's not as though I feel like more strongly than I would like. I think also people tend to overweight risk on a personal level. It's one thing if you've got a mortgage to pay and kids to support, and that if you were to deviate from your job, that how you will feed your family and pay the rent, and okay, that's understandable. But let's say you're young and you're just coming out of college or coming out of high school or whatever, what do you risk? You're not going to stop. I mean, it's really certainly not in any kind of modern economy. It's so easy to earn enough money just to live somewhere and be free. I don't know what are they afraid of. They're mostly afraid of failure, I think. People should be less risk averse when there's not much at risk. What is education like? You're basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain, and it's actually amazingly bad informational education. It's like it shouldn't be like this huge chore. Like the more you can gamify the process of learning, the better.
I was at sort of a slight existential crisis because I was trying to figure out what does it all mean? Like, what's the purpose of things? And I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward.
What drives you? What is it that when you wake up in the morning, do you see a problem and you want to solve it?
The thing that drives me is that I want to be able to think about the future and feel good about that. So that we're doing what we can to have the future be as good as possible, to be inspired by what is likely to happen, and to look forward to the next day. So that's what really drives me. Is trying to figure out how do we make sure that things are great and going to be so. And that's the underlying principle behind Tesla and SpaceX. Is that I think it's pretty important that we accelerate the transition to sustainable generation and consumption of energy. It's inevitable, but it matters if it happens sooner or later. And then SpaceX is about helping make life multiplanetary and doing what we can to continue the dream of Apollo. And ultimately make a contribution to life becoming multiplanetary.
Let's talk a little more about that. I think everyone very interested in that when you say making life multiplanetary.
Yeah, that's exciting.
It is exciting. So what's your vision there?
I think particularly for Americans, like think about America as a nation of explorers. People came here from other parts of the world. They chose to give up the known in favor of the unknown. So I think exploration, like the United States is a distillation of the human spirit of exploration, and so that's why it appeals to Americans so much. You can see this when there was a shuttle tragedy, and 7 people died, and that's terrible. But a lot of people die all the time. But why do we care so much? Because it was the dream of exploration that was dying along with other people. That's why. I thought both Tesla and SpaceX would fail. Yeah, sure. Of course. I expected to lose it. Well, technically, what I thought was, well, I'll take half the money from PayPal, and if I lose half of it, that's okay. But then, of course, the companies encounter difficulties and then have a choice of either let the company die or put all the money into the companies. And so, really don't want the companies to die, so I put all the money in companies. And then have to borrow money from friends to pay living expenses. It's just we're looking just for evidence of exceptional ability, and if there's a track record of exceptional achievement, then it's likely that will continue into the future. Well, it really depends on the stakes. If the stakes are high, if it's really important, then one should, will overcome the fear and just do it anyway. But essentially, it's drive overrides fear. But I feel the fear. It's kind of annoying. I wish I felt it less.
SpaceX宇宙ビジネスの
Elon, hey, welcome back to TED. It's great to have you here.
Nice having me.
So, in the next half hour or so, we're going to spend some time exploring your vision for what an exciting future might look like, which I guess makes the first question a little ironic. Why are you boring?
Yeah, I ask myself that frequently. We're trying to dig a hole under LA, and this is to create the beginning of what will hopefully be a 3D network of tunnels to alleviate congestion. So, right now, I think one of the most soul-destroying things is traffic. It affects people in every part of the world. It takes away so much of your life, and it's horrible. It's particularly horrible in LA. And so
I think you brought with you the first visualization that's been shown of this. Can I show this?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the first time, just to sort of show what we're talking about. So a couple of key things that are important in having a 3D tunnel network. First of all, you have to be able to integrate the entrance and exit of the tunnel seamlessly into the fabric of the city. So by having an elevator, sort of a car skate that's on an elevator, you can integrate the entrance and exits to the tunnel network just by using 2 parking spaces. And then the car gets on a skate. There's no speed limit here, so we're designing this to be able to operate at 200 kilometers an hour, about 200 kilometers an hour, or about 130 miles per hour. So you should be able to get from, say, Westwood to LAX in 6 minutes, 5-6 minutes.
So possibly initially done as like on a sort of toll road type basis.
Yeah.
Which I guess alleviates some traffic from the surface streets as well.
So I don't know if people notice it in the video, but there's no real limit to how many levels of tunnel you can have. You can go much further deep than you can go up. The deepest mines are much deeper than the tallest buildings are tall. So you can alleviate any arbitrary level of urban congestion with the 3D tunnel network. This is a very important point. So a key rebuttal to the tunnels is that if you add one layer of tunnels, then that will simply alleviate congestion, will get used up, and then you'll be back where you started, back with congestion. But you can go to any arbitrary number of tunnels, any number of levels.
But people seem traditionally it's incredibly expensive to dig, and that would block this idea.
Yeah. Well, they're right. To give you an example, the LA subway extension, which is, I think it's a 2.5-mile extension, that was just completed for $2 billion. So it's roughly $1 billion a mile to do the subway extension in LA. And this is not the highest utility subway in the world. It's quite difficult to dig tunnels normally. I think we need to have at least a 10-fold improvement in the cost per mile of tunneling.
And how did you achieve that?
I guess, actually, if you just do 2 things, you can get to approximately an order of magnitude improvement, and I think you can go beyond that. So the first thing to do is to cut the tunnel diameter by a factor of 2 or more. So a single road lane tunnel, according to regulations, has to be 26 feet, maybe 28 feet in diameter to allow for crashes and emergency vehicles and sufficient ventilation for combustion engine cars. But if you shrink that diameter to what we're attempting, which is 12 feet, which is plenty to get an electric skate through. You drop the diameter by a factor of 2 and the cross-sectional area by a factor of 4. So, and the tunneling cost scales with the cross-sectional area. So that's roughly a half order of magnitude improvement right there. Then tunneling machines currently tunnel for half the time, then they stop, and then the rest of the time is putting in reinforcements for the tunnel wall. So if you design the machine instead to do continuous tunneling and reinforcing, that'll give you a factor of 2 improvement. Combine that and it's a factor of 8. Also, these machines are far from being at their power or thermal limit. So you can jack up the power to the machine substantially. I think you can get at least a factor of 2, maybe a factor of 4 or 5 improvement on top of that. So I think there's a fairly straightforward series of steps to get somewhere in excess of an order of magnitude improvement in the cost per mile. Our target actually is we've got a pet snail called Gary. This is from Gary the snail from South Park. SpongeBob SquarePants. So Gary is capable currently he's capable of going 14 times faster than a tunnel boring machine. Okay.
You want to beat Gary?
We want to beat Gary. He's not a patient little fellow, and we want that will be victory. Victory is beating the snail.
But a lot of people dreaming about future cities, they imagine that the solution is sort of flying cars, drones, etc. You go above ground. Why isn't that a better solution? You save all that tunneling cost.
Right. I'm in favor of flying things. I always say do rockets. So I like things that fly. This is not some inherent bias against flying things, but there is a challenge with flying cars in that they'll be quite noisy. The wind force generated will be very high. Let's just say that if something's flying over your head, if there are a whole bunch of flying cars going all over the place, that is not an anxiety-reducing situation. You don't think to yourself, well, I feel better about today. You're thinking like, did they service their hubcap? Or is it going to come off and guillotine me as a final pass?
And so you've got this vision of future cities with these rich 3D networks of tunnels underneath. Is there a time here with Hyperloop? Could you apply these tunnels to use for this Hyperloop idea you raised a few years ago?
Yeah, so we've been sort of puttering around with the Hyperloop stuff for a while. We built a Hyperloop test track adjacent to SpaceX just for a student competition to encourage innovative ideas in transport. It actually ends up being the biggest vacuum chamber in the world after the Large Hadron Collider by volume. So it's sort of quite fun to do that, but it's kind of a hobby thing. And then we think we might. So we built a little pusher car to push the student pods, but we're going to try seeing how fast we can make the pusher go if it's not pushing something. So I mean, sort of cautiously optimistic we'll be able to be faster than the world's fastest bullet train, even in a 0.8 mile stretch.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's either going to smash into tiny pieces or.
But you could picture then a Hyperloop in a tunnel.
Yes.
Running quite long distances.
Exactly. So in looking at tunneling technology, it turns out that in order to make a tunnel, you have to, in order to seal against the water table, you've got to typically design a tunnel wall to be a good to about 5 or 6 atmospheres. So to go to vacuum is only 1 atmosphere when you're vacuum. So actually, it sort of turns out that automatically, if you build a tunnel that is good enough to resist the water table, it is automatically capable of holding vacuum.
Huh.
So yeah.
And so you can actually picture this, like what kind of length tunnel is in Elon's future running Hyperloop?
Yeah, I think there's no real length limit. You could dig as much as you want. I think if you were to do something like the DC to New York Hyperloop, I think you probably want to go underground the entire way because it's a high density area. You're going under a lot of buildings and houses, and if you go deep enough, you cannot detect the tunnel. Sometimes people think, well, it's going to be pretty annoying to have a tunnel dug under my house. But if that tunnel is dug more than about 3 or 4 tunnel diameters beneath your house, you will not be able to detect it being dug at all. In fact, if you're able to detect the tunnel being dug, whatever device you're using, you can get a lot of money for that device from the Israeli military, who's trying to detect tunnels from Hamas, and from the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, they're trying to detect drug tunnels. So the reality is that Earth is incredibly good at absorbing vibrations, and once the tunnel depth is below a certain level, it is undetectable. Maybe you have a very sensitive seismic instrument, you might be able to detect it.
So you started a new company to do this called The Boring Company. Very nice, very funny. But how,
it's funny.
How much of your time is this?
It's maybe 2 or 3%.
You called it a hobby. This is what an Elon Musk hobby looks like.
I mean, it really is. Like, we actually, this is basically interns and people doing it part-time. So this is, we bought some second-hand machinery, and it's kind of puttering along, but it's making good progress. So
an even bigger part of your time is being spent on electrifying cars and transport through Tesla. Is one of the motivations for the tunneling project the realization that actually, in a world where cars are electric and where they're self-driving, there may end up being more cars on the roads on any given hour than there are now?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people think that when you make cars autonomous, that they'll be able to go faster and that will alleviate congestion. And to some degree that will be true. But once you have shared autonomy where it's much cheaper to go by car, you can go point to point, the affordability of going in a car will be better than that of a bus. Like, it would cost less than a bus ticket. So the amount of driving that will occur will be much greater with shared autonomy, and actually traffic will get far worse.
I mean, you started Tesla with the goal of persuading the world that electrification was the future of cars.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, people were laughing at you. Now, not so much. I mean,
okay.
I don't know. Isn't it true that pretty much every auto manufacturer has announced serious electrification plans for the short to medium term future?
Yeah. I think almost every automaker has some electric vehicle program. They vary in seriousness. Some are very serious about transitioning entirely to electric, and some are just dabbling in it. And some amazingly are still pursuing fuel cells, but I think that won't last much longer.
But isn't there a sense, though, Elon, where you can now just declare victory and say, we did it, let the world electrify, and you go on and focus on other stuff?
Yeah. I tend to stay with Tesla as far into the future as I can imagine. And there are a lot of exciting things that will be upcoming. We've got obviously the Model 3 that's coming soon. We'll be unveiling the Tesla semi-truck.
And we're going to comment on this. So Model 3, so it's supposed to be coming in July-ish?
Yeah, it's looking quite good for starting production in July. Yeah.
Wow. One of the things that people are so excited about is the fact that it's got Autopilot. And you put out this video a while back showing what that technology looked like, or would look like.
Yeah.
There's obviously Autopilot in Model S right now.
Yeah.
What are we seeing here?
Yeah, so this is using only cameras and a GPS. So there's no LiDAR or radar being used here. This is just using passive optical, which is essentially what a person uses. The whole road system is meant to be navigated with passive optical or cameras. And so once you solve cameras or vision, then autonomy is solved. If you don't solve vision, it's not solved. So that's why our focus is so heavily on having a vision neural net that's very effective for road conditions.
Right, many other people are going the LiDAR route. You want cameras plus radar is most of it.
You can absolutely be superhuman with just cameras. Like, you could probably do 10 times better than humans with just cameras.
So the new cars being sold right now have about eight cameras in them. They can't yet do what that showed. When will they be able to?
I think we're still on track for being able to go cross country from LA to New York by the end of the year, fully autonomous.
So a car, by the end of the year, you're saying someone's going to sit in a Tesla without touching the steering wheel, tap in New York, off it goes.
Yeah.
Won't have to ever touch the wheel by the end of 2017.
Yeah, essentially November or December this year, we should be able to go from all the way from a parking lot in California to a parking lot in New York. No controls touched at any point during the entire journey.
And maybe. Part of that is possible because you've already got a fleet of Teslas driving all these roads. You're accumulating a huge amount of data of that national road system.
Yes, but the thing that will be interesting is that I'm actually fairly confident it will be able to do that route even if you change the route dynamically. So it's fairly easy. If you say I'm going to be really good at one specific route, that's one thing, but it should be able to go really be very good. So then once you enter a highway, to go anywhere on the highway system in a given country. So it's not sort of limited to LA, New York. We could change it and make it Seattle, Florida. that day, well, in real time. So you were going from LA to New York, now go from LA to Toronto.
So leaving aside regulation for a second, in terms of the technology alone, the time when someone will be able to buy one of your cars and literally just take their hands off the wheel and go to sleep and wake up and find that they've arrived, how far away is that to do that?
I think that's about 2 years. The real trick of it is not, how do you make it work, say 99.9% of the time? Because if a car crashes, say 1 in 1,000 times, then you're probably still not going to be comfortable falling asleep. That's, you shouldn't be, certainly. But it's never going to be perfect. No system is going to be perfect. But if you say it's perhaps, the car is unlikely to crash in 100 lifetimes or 1,000 lifetimes, then you're like, okay, wow, if I would live 1,000 lives, I would still most likely never experience a crash, then that's probably okay.
See, I guess the big concern is that people may actually get seduced too early to think that this is safe, and that you'll have some horrible incident happen that puts things in fact.
Well, I think that the autonomy system is likely to at least mitigate the crash, except in rare circumstances. The thing to appreciate about vehicle safety is this is probabilistic. So that there's some chance that anytime the human driver gets in the car that they will have an accident. That is their fault. It's never zero. And so the key threshold for autonomy is how much better does autonomy need to be than a person before you can rely on it.
But once you get that literally safe hands-off driving, the power to disrupt the whole industry seems massive, because at that point you've spoken of people being able to buy a car, drop you off at work, and then you let it go and provide a sort of Uber-like service to other people, earn you money, maybe even cover the cost of your lease of that car.
Exactly.
So you can kind of get a car for free. Is that really likely?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what will happen. So there will be a shared autonomy fleet where you buy your car and you can choose to use that car exclusively. You could choose to have it be used only by friends and family, only by 5-star other drivers who are rated 5-star. You can choose to share it sometimes, but not other times. That's 100% what will occur. It's just a question of when.
Wow. So you mentioned the Semi, and I think you're planning to announce this in September. But I'm curious whether there's anything you could show us today.
I will show you a teaser shot of the truck.
Teaser shot.
It's live.
Okay.
No, that's definitely a case where we want to be cautious about the autonomy features. Yeah.
Is that just, we can't see that much of it. It doesn't look like just a little friendly neighborhood truck. It looks kind of badass. What sort of Semi is this?
So this is a heavy-duty, long-range semi-truck. So it's like the highest weight capability and with long range. So essentially, it's meant to alleviate the heavy-duty trucking limits. And this is something which people do not today think is possible, to think the truck doesn't have enough power or it doesn't have enough range. And then with the Tesla Semi, we want to show that an electric truck actually can out-torque any diesel semi. And if you had a tug-of-war competition, like the Tesla Semi will tug the diesel Semi uphill.
That's pretty good. In short term, these aren't drivers. These are going to be trucks that truck drivers want to drive.
Yes. No, so what we really found out this is you have a flat torque RPM curve with an electric motor, whereas with a diesel motor or any kind of internal combustion engine car, you've got torque RPM curve that looks like a hill. So this will be a very spry truck. You can drive this around like a sports car. There's no gears. It's like single speed. So
there's a great movie to be made here somewhere. I don't know what it is, and I don't know that it ends well, but it's a great.
It's quite bizarre test driving when I was driving the test prototype for the first truck. It's really weird because you're driving around and you're so nimble, and you're in this giant truck.
Wait, you've already driven a prototype?
I drove it around the parking lot. I was like, this is crazy.
Wow. This is not everywhere.
This is like driving this giant truck and sort of making these mad maneuvers.
That's cool. Okay, from a really badass picture to a kind of less badass picture. This is just a cute house from Desperate Housewives or something. What on earth is going on here?
Well, this illustrates the picture of the future that I think is how things will evolve. You've got an electric car in the driveway. If you look in between the electric car and the house, there are actually 3 power walls stacked up against the side of the house. And then that house roof is a solar roof. So that's an actual solar glass roof.
Okay, so that's
a picture of a real. Admittedly, it's a real fake house. That's a real fake house.
So these roof tiles, some of them have in them basically solar power, the ability to.
Yeah, so solar glass tiles where you can adjust the texture and the color at a very fine grained level, and then there's sort of micro louvers in the glass, such that when you're looking at the roof from street level, close to street level, all the tiles look the same whether there is a solar panel behind it or a solar cell behind it or not. So you have an even color from the ground level. If you were to look at it from a helicopter, you'd be actually able to look through and see that some of the glass tiles have a solar cell behind them and some do not.
Right. You put them in the ones that are likely to see a lot of sun.
Yes.
And that makes these roofs super affordable, right? Not that much more expensive than just tiling the roof.
Yeah. We're very confident that the cost of the roof plus the cost of electricity. That a solar glass roof will be less than the cost of a normal roof plus the cost of electricity. So this will be economically a no-brainer. We think it'll look great, and it will last. I mean, we thought about like having the warranty be infinity, but then people thought, well, that might sound like we were just talking rubbish. But actually, this is toughened glass. Like well after the house has collapsed, and there's nothing there, the roof will the glass tiles will still be there.
So I think you're running. So you're running this out in a couple weeks' time, I think, with four different roofing types.
Yeah, we're starting off with two initially, and the second two will be introduced early next year.
What's the scale of ambition here? How many houses do you believe could end up having this type of roofing?
I mean, I think eventually almost all houses will have a solar roof. Now the thing is to consider the time scale here to be probably on the order of 40 or 50 years. So on average, a roof is replaced every 20 to 25 years. So, but you don't start replacing all roofs immediately. But eventually, if you say we would fast forward to say 15 years from now, it will be unusual to have a roof that does not have solar.
Is there a mental model thing that people don't get here that there's been, because of the shift in the cost of economics of solar power, that like most houses actually have enough sunlight on their roof pretty much to power all of their needs. If you could capture the power, it could pretty much power all their needs, right? You could go operate them.
Yeah, it depends on where you are and what the house size is relative to the roof area. But yeah, it's a fair statement to say that most houses in the US have enough roof area to power all the needs of the house.
Okay, so the key to the economics of cars, of these houses, is the falling price of lithium-ion batteries, which you've made a huge bet on as Tesla. In many ways, that's almost a core competency. And you've decided to really own that competency. You just have to build the world's largest manufacturing plant, double the world's supply of lithium-ion batteries.
Yeah.
With this guy, what is this?
Yeah, so that's the Gigafactory. Progress so far in the Gigafactory. Eventually, you can sort of roughly see that there's sort of a diamond shape overall. When it's fully done, it'll look like a giant diamond, but that's the idea behind it. It's aligned on true north. There's a small detail in it.
And capable of producing eventually 100 gigawatt hours of batteries a year.
100 gigawatt hours. You can probably more, but yeah.
And they're actually being produced right now already here, right?
They're already produced.
That's this video.
Yeah.
I mean, does that speed it up? Or
that's the slowed down version.
How fast does it actually go?
Well, when it's running at full speed, you can't actually see the cells without a strobe light. It's just blurred.
And one of your core ideas about what makes an exciting future is a future where we no longer feel guilty about energy. Help us picture this. I mean, how many gigafactories, if you like, does it take to get us there?
About 100, roughly. It's not 10, it's not 1,000, most likely 100.
So I can find this amazing. Like, you can actually picture, if that's right, you can picture what it would take to move the world off this vast fossil fuel thing. It's like, you're building one, cost $5 billion, maybe the next one, or whatever, $5 to $10 billion. Like, it's kind of cool that you can picture that project. You're planning to do a Tesla, or at least another two, announce another two this year.
I think we'll announce locations for somewhere between 2 and 4 gigafactories later this year. Yeah, probably 4.
Whoa. Okay, I can't tease, no more teasing from you for here. Like, where, continent? You can say no.
We need to address the global market.
Okay. This is cool. I think we should talk for actually, global market. So I have to ask you one question. I can ask you one question about politics. Only one. I constantly apologize, but I need to ask you this. You're well, now giving advice to a guy who has said he doesn't really believe in climate change, and there's a lot of people out there who kind of think you shouldn't be doing that. They like people to walk away from that. What would you say to them?
Well, I think that there's, first of all, I'm just on 2 advisory councils where the format consists of going around the room and asking people's opinions on things. And so there's like a meeting every month or 2. That's the sum total of my contribution. But I think to the degree that there are people in the room who are arguing in favor of doing something about climate change, or other sort of social issues. I've used the meetings I've had thus far to argue in favor of immigration and in favor of climate change. And if I hadn't done that, that wasn't on the agenda before. So maybe nothing will happen, but at least the words were said.
Okay. So let's talk SpaceX Mars. The last time you were here, you spoke about this what seemed like a kind of incredibly ambitious dream to develop rockets that are actually reusable. You've only done it.
Yeah.
I mean, talk us through this. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so this is one of our rocket boosters coming back from very high and fast in space. So just delivered the upper stage at high velocity. I think it's maybe on sort of Mach 7 or so delivery of the upper stage. Yeah.
So that was the sped up.
That's the slowed down version.
That was the sped up. But I mean, that's amazing. And several of these failed before you finally figured out how to get to do it. But now you've done this what, 5 or 6 times?
I think we're 8 or 9 or something.
Yeah. And for the first time, you've actually reflown one of the rockets that landed. So
we landed the rocket booster and then prepped it for flight again and flew again. So it's the first reflight of an orbital booster where that reflight is relevant. So it's important to appreciate that reusability is only relevant if it is rapid and complete.
Right.
So like an aircraft or a car, the reusability is rapid and complete. You do not send your aircraft to Boeing in between flights.
Right. So this is allowing you to dream of this really ambitious idea of sending many people to Mars in 10 or 20 years time, I guess.
Yeah.
In the next 20 years. And you've designed this outrageous rocket to do it. Can you help us understand the scale of this thing?
Well, visually, you can see that's person. Yeah, that's the vehicle.
So if that was a skyscraper, that's like 40, did I mean that? 40 stories?
Yeah, maybe a little more, yeah. The thrust level of this is really, this configuration is about 4 times the thrust of the Saturn V moon rocket.
4 times the thrust of the biggest rocket humanity ever created before.
Yeah. I mean,
as one does.
Yeah. I mean, in units of 747, like 747 is only about quarter million pounds of thrust. So so there are for every 10 million pounds of thrust, there's 47. So this would be the thrust equivalent of 120 747s with all engines blazing.
And so even with a machine designed to escape Earth's gravity, I think you told me last this thing could actually take a fully loaded 747, people, cargo, everything, into orbit.
Exactly. This can take a fully loaded 747 with maximum fuel, maximum passengers, maximum cargo on the 747. This can take it as cargo.
So based on this, you presented recently this interplanetary transport system, which is visualized this way. And this is a scene you picture in 30 years time, 20 years time, right? People walking into this rocket.
I'm hopeful it's sort of in the 8 to 10 year time frame. Aspirationally, that's our target. Our internal targets are more aggressive, but I think,
Okay.
So this vehicle seems quite large, and it's large by comparison with other rockets. I think the future spacecraft will make this look like a rowboat. I mean, this is the future spaceships will be truly enormous.
Why? Why do we need to build a city on Mars with 1 million people on it in your lifetime? Which I think is kind of what you said you'd love to do.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a future that is inspiring and appealing. I mean, I think that there have to be reasons that you get up in the morning and you want to live. Like, why do you want to live? What's the point? What inspires you? What do you love about the future? And if we're not out there, if the future does not include being out there among the stars, and being a multi-planet species, I find that it's incredibly depressing if that's not the future that we're going to have.
People want to position this as an either-or. That there are so many desperate things happening on the planet now, from climate to poverty to you pick your issue, and this feels like a distraction. You shouldn't be thinking about this. You should be solving what's here and now. And to be fair, you've done a fair old bit to actually do that with your work on sustainable energy. But why not just do that?
Well, I think there's. I look at the future from a standpoint of the probabilities. It's like a branching stream of probabilities, and there are actions that we can take that affect those probabilities, or that accelerate one thing or slow down another thing. Introduce something new to the probability stream. Sustainable energy will happen no matter what. If there was no Tesla never existed. It would have to happen out of necessity. It's tautological. If you don't have sustainable energy, it means you have unsustainable energy. Eventually, you'll run out, and the laws of economics will drive civilization towards sustainable energy inevitably. The fundamental value of a company like Tesla is the degree to which it accelerates the advent of sustainable energy faster than it would otherwise occur. So when I think what is the fundamental good of a company like Tesla, I would say hopefully it is if it accelerated that by a decade, potentially more than a decade, that would be quite a good thing to occur. That's what I consider to be the fundamental sort of aspirational good of Tesla. Then there's becoming a multi-planet species and space-faring civilization. This is not inevitable. It's very important to appreciate this is not inevitable. The sustainable energy future, I think, is largely inevitable, but being space-faring civilization is definitely not inevitable. If you look at the progress in space, in 1969, we were able to send somebody to the moon. 1969. Then we had the space shuttle. The space shuttle could only take people to low Earth orbit. Then the space shuttle retired, and the United States could take no one to orbit. So that's the trend. The trend is down to nothing. This is not. People are mistaken when they think that technology just automatically improves. It does not automatically improve. It only improves if a lot of people work very hard to make it better. And actually, it will, I think, by itself degrade, actually. You look at great civilizations like ancient Egypt, and they were able to make the pyramids, and they forgot how to do that. And the Romans, they built these incredible aqueducts. They forgot how to do it.
It almost seems, listening to you, look at the different things you've done, that you've got this unique double motivation on everything. I find so interesting. Which is one is this desire to work for humanity as long as it's good. The other is this desire to do something exciting, and it's often it feels like you feel like you need the one to drive the other. With Tesla, you want to have sustainable energy, so you make these super sexy, exciting cars to do it. Solar energy, we need to get there, so we need to make these beautiful roofs. We haven't even spoken about your newest thing, which we don't have time to do, but you want to save humanity from bad AI, and so you're going to create this really cool brain-machine interface to give us all infinite memory and telepathy and so forth. And on Mars, it feels like what you're saying is, yeah, we need to save humanity and have a backup plan, but also we need to inspire humanity, and this is a way to inspire.
I think the value of beauty and inspiration is very much underrated, no question. But I want to be clear. I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. That is not the. I'm just trying to think about the future and not be sad.
Beautiful statement. I think everyone here would agree that it is not. None of this is going to happen inevitably. The fact that in your mind you dream this stuff. You dream stuff that no one else would dare dream, or no one else would be capable of dreaming at the level of complexity that you do. The fact that you do that, Elon Musk, is a really remarkable thing. Thank you for helping us all to dream a bit bigger.
But you'll tell me if it ever starts getting genuinely insane, right?
That was really, really fantastic. That was really fantastic. Good job.
まだ若いんだね。
50いくつかじゃん。なんか少年みたいだな。でも
若い。50代。
なんか素直な感じが。
そうね。他の経営者とちょっと違う感じ。ちょっと老けたあれ。取ったのか。
So now is the time to do that. I think these are pretty important ones. Some of them are going to sound like, well, you've heard it before, but it's worth re-emphasizing. I think the first is you need to work, depending on how well you want to do, particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? When my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time. So briefly, I had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. Work hard, like, I mean, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, you say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company. If you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all the company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. Do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. I'd say focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. For example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. Put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. I think that's the way to go. So for any given company, just keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are spending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts. And then the final thing is to sort of don't just follow the trend. You may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach or first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. And it's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method. And anyway, so that's, and then I think that the final thing I would encourage you to do is, now is the time to take risk. Yeah, you don't have kids. Your obligation. Well, so you probably don't have kids. But as you get older, your obligations increase. So and once you have a family, you start taking risks not just for yourself but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it. Thank you. If I can do some of those things, basically if I can advance technology, then that's like magic, and that would be really cool. When I was young, I didn't really know what I was going to do when I got older. People kept asking me, but then eventually I thought that the idea of inventing things would be really cool. And the reason I thought that was because I read a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, which said that a sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that's really true. If you go back, say 300 years, the things that we take for granted today you'd be burned at the stake for. Being able to fly, that's crazy. Being able to see over long distances, being able to communicate, having effectively and having access to all the world's information instantly from almost anywhere on the earth. This is stuff that really would be magic, or would be considered magic in times past. In fact, I think it actually goes beyond that, because there are many things that we take for granted today that weren't even imagined in times past. They weren't even in the realm of magic. So it actually goes beyond that. So I thought, well, if I can do some of those things, basically if I can advance technology, then that's like magic. That would be really cool. And I always had sort of a slight existential crisis, because I was trying to figure out what does it all mean? Like, what's the purpose of things? And I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward. So I studied physics and business because I figured in order to do a lot of these things, you need to know how the universe works, and you need to know how the economy works. And you also need to be able to bring a lot of people together to work with you to create something, because it's very difficult to do something as an individual if it's significant technology. I came out to California to try to figure out how to improve the energy density of electric vehicles, basically to try to figure out if there was an advanced capacitor that could serve as an alternative to batteries. And that was in '95, and that's also when the internet started to happen. And I thought, well, one of which was PayPal. So one of the things that was important then in the creation of PayPal was kind of how it started, because initially, the initial thought was with PayPal was to create an agglomeration of financial services, so to have one place where all your financial services needs would be seamlessly integrated and work smoothly. And then we had like a little feature which was to do email payments. And whenever we show the system off to someone, we'd show the hard part, which was the agglomeration of financial services, which was quite difficult to put together. Nobody was interested. Then we'd show people email payments, which was actually quite easy, and everybody was interested. So this is, I think it's important to take feedback from your environment, really try to make that work, and that's what really got things to take off. But if we hadn't responded to what people said, then we probably would not have been successful. So it's important to look for things like that and focus on them when you see them, and you correct your prior assumptions.
ちっちゃいおじさん。
2023, humankind will once again head to the moon. The first civilian lunar mission, Dear Moon. This mission will be spearheaded by Japanese entrepreneur Yusaku Maezawa. And today, he is announcing a new challenge for his future crew.
はい、皆さんこんにちは。ディアムーンプロジェクトの主催者であります MG こと前澤友作です。今日は僕の自宅からお届けしてるんですが、これ皆さん知ってますか？長谷川東博っていう日本を代表する作家の、代表作です。今日は約2年ぶりになりますけれども、ディアムーンプロジェクトで大きな発表があります。結論から言います。同乗者を募集します。8名、世界中から今回募集します。全員でおそらく10名から12名の旅になるんですけれども、そのうちのなんと8名を募集しちゃおうじゃないかという発表です。今から2年後、2023年中を予定してます。で、ご存知の通り、スペース X 社の、現在開発中のスターシップっていうロケットに乗って行くことになります。で、月に行くまで3日間。で、月の裏側を通って戻ってくるのに3日間。費用は僕が全部出します。もうチケットは全部買ってますし、もう貸し切りの船になりますので、そこに10人から12人乗っていくことになりますけれど、みんなで楽しい旅にしたいなと思います。当初ですね、2年前、僕はこう言ってました。世界中のアーティストの皆さんにお声掛けして一緒に行こう、もうそんな旅にしたいと、こういう発表をしてましたけれども、ちょっとだけ変わりました。なんで変わったか、アーティストって一体誰のこと言ってんだろうって分からなくなりました。歌を歌ってればいいのか、ダンスをしてればいいのか、本を書いてればいいのか、どういう人が一体アーティストなんだろうっていうふうにちょっと分かんなくなりまして、もしかしたら世界中で何かしらこうクリエイティブな活動をしている人、こういう人を全てアーティストって言ったっていいじゃないかっていうふうに、そんなふうに思いましたですね。で、そういう意味でもっともっと世界中の多くの方々にチャンスを与えられるんじゃないかって、自分でアーティストって言っちゃえばもう大丈夫です。で、ただ条件があります。2つ条件があります。1つ目、その皆さんがやっているつなぎながらの活動、これが今回宇宙に行くことでなんかこう大きく成長して、なんかそれが人や社会の役に立つなっていう、そういう可能性を持っている人に参加してほしいんです。今やっている活動、皆さん満足されていますでしょうか？その活動を宇宙に行くことでなんかもっともっと大きくすることできないでしょうか？そういう可能性のある人はぜひ応募してください。2つ目、そういうふうに思っている周りの同乗者、同船者のこともサポートできる人、この2つを条件として8名の乗組員を新たに募集することになりました。
Let's see what Elon Musk has to say about the Dear Moon mission.
What's really significant about the DMU mission is that it'll be the first private space flight, first commercial space flight with humans beyond Earth orbit. So this has never occurred before, and in fact, we're going to go past the moon. So it will actually end up being further. This mission, we expect people will go further than any human has ever gone from planet Earth. So I think this will be very exciting for people to tune in and watch this and enjoy it vicariously. And I know that as I was also providing places on the ship for artists and others to join. So he wants this to be something that is exciting and inspiring for the whole world.
僕が一番楽しみにしているのは自分の生まれた故郷この地球を丸くそして青く輝くこの地球を自分の目で確かめることです。そして月からぐるっと回って出てくる時にですねアースライズという現象がもしかしたら見れるかもしれません。サンライズと同じように地球がまるでこう日の出のように月の端からこう浮き上がってくるそんな光景を見にした時にどんな感動が待ってるんでしょうか。3つあります。1つ目好奇心です。まだ見たことのないもの行ったことのない場所に行きたいというこの好奇心を満たしたい。2つ目地球の素晴らしさを改めて感じたい。自分の生まれ育った地球偉大な地球ここに改めて感謝したい。3つ目自分の小ささ自分の未熟さこれを改めて実感したい。宇宙に行けば自分って小さいな未熟だなって改めて思うと思います。そういうことを通してもっともっと頑張ろうともっともっと成長しようときっとそういうふうに思えるんじゃないかと。ちょっと怖いです。けどそんなことより好奇心が上回るしイーロンはじめスペース X チームの技術チームワークを信頼しています。それはイーロン・マスクに聞いてください。
Yes, I'm highly confident that we will have reached orbits many times with Starship before 2023, and that it will be safe enough for human transport by 2023. It's looking very, very promising. Yeah, I think for sure anyone who is interested in joining on this mission, I think they'll love it. This will be historic, and I think very fun and interesting and inspiring and exciting. Great.
多様な方々からの応募をお待ちしています。今どんなことをしていても構いません。自分が何か人や社会の役に立ちたいんだ自分のクリエイティブな活動を何かこう大きく飛躍させたいんだそう思う方は、どしどしご応募ください。ありがとうございました。日本の自宅からお届けしました MG でした。さよなら。
MG って呼んでる。
Thanks a lot for supporting the future of human spaceflight. It's very much appreciated, and I think will make a real difference. Thank you.
前澤
今あれが間違った。すごいね。
そんなかな。
今技術も驚くほど進化しているのにもかかわらず世界の経済、世界自体がそんなに動いていかなかったですね。未来に停滞してますね。今ねここ数年思いませんグリグリ伸びてる感じしますよね。どの分野だからそこまで動いてなかったけども技術とかテクノロジーですごい変わってたで彼みたいなのが出てきてそれをデザインする人間がいるだけでこれだけのイノベーションが起こるのか安心しますね。イーロン・マスクが描く世界イーロン・マスクの何がすごいのか彼は何を行おうとしているのかスペース X、テスラモーターズ、ボーリングカンパニー、BMI、いろいろ会社持ってるんですね。これらをですね解説しながらイーロン・マスクについて追っていきたいというふうに思います。まずこの動画を見るメリットアーリーサクセスというやつが一つそれと第一原理こういったイーロン・マスクの考え方が分かるというのが一つそれと夢がある未来を垣間見ることができるというのがもう一つですね。でそのためにスペース X とテスラモーターズ、BMI このあたりの解説をしていきたいというふうに思います。なので夢が見れますということと生活において勉強になるそんな感じだと思うんですね。まずイーロン・マスクについてちょっと解説します。1971年6月28日にイーロン・マスクが出てなるんですね。1917歳その時に5ヶ月間地元のですねプレトリア大学で水学と工学を学んでですねでその後親の援助なしに独立をしていて1989年6月にカナダへ移住します。これはですね
今日はここまで。
ペンシルバニア大学で経済学と物理学の学部を取得しています。
また明日イーロン・マスク特集をします。
クリーンエネルギー、宇宙、そういうふうに考えているんですね。1995年に高エネルギー物理学を学んだ。
ご視聴ありがとうございました。明日もまたイーロン・マスク特集です。じゃあ今日はおやすみなさい。それでは
日本円にすると350億円、とんでもない2200万ドル、25億円手にします。そのお金を元にいろいろことやっていくわけなんですが、1999年オンライン金融サービスと電子メールの支払いサービスっていうのを